Another day watching the MAGA Republicans squirm and squeal over the latest Trump scandal. And the latest one involves, leaking war plans on text chats with fist bump emojis to a reporter, the editor-in-chief from The Atlantic. But now the MAGA Republicans are going with, you know what, this isn't a big deal. Mistakes happen. And so they are running to their media propaganda network, Fox. Here's MAGA Republican Pat Harrigan. Here's what he has to say. Mistakes happen.
Is that we had a successful operation in Yemen. The mission was not compromised from an execution perspective. And ultimately, President Trump was able to send a very strong message to our adversaries, to Iran, to the Houthi leadership, saying things are going to be very different under the Trump administration than they were underneath the Biden administration.
Well, I think that's a very important point that you just said. I mean, mistakes happen. Mistakes happen all the time. And at the end of the day, let's talk about ramifications. What were the ramifications? Did the enemy find out any secrets about the United States?
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, I think that
so
if
the answer
we had
is no,
had
correct? So I'm just asking you a question. The answer was no, right? The enemy did not find out any secrets from the United States?
That's correct. The mission was not compromised from that perspective.
Right.
I mean, it would be laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. They just make stuff up too. For example, we're also knowing that one of the people on that chat, Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy to Russia, the one who spews all that Russia propaganda, but which one doesn't in the Trump regime, was in Moscow at the time, and they were clearly going to be looking at his Signal chats and looking at all of his phones. We also know that Tulsi Gabbard was abroad as well. How do they know that this stuff wasn't compromised? I'm sure this wasn't the only one time that they were having these chats on Signal, and it's important for you to know why they're having these chats on Signal as well. And it's because it was laid out in Project 2025. They do not want to turn over any records to public records requests or have to preserve it under the Presidential Records Act. So they try to hide it on Signal. And now our national security is compromised. Here's Dan Crenshaw, by the way, MAGA Republican Congress member. He's just like, look, we got to move on. If Hegseth says it's this, I'm not even sure what Hegseth. It's this. Why do we even care? Play this clip.
No one was texting war plans. Dan, it seems this was obviously a mistake. The guy was put on the chat. Your reaction and the threat here.
Yeah, look, it's a mistake and we got to move on. If Secretary Hegseth says there was no classified information, I'll take him at his word until I see otherwise. The texts that were published in the paper, obviously it's not great. You don't want to be adding journalists to what is a sensitive conversation, but I didn't see anything that even came close to meeting the level of classified, but I also don't know. So if Mr. Hegseth is saying that, I'll take him at his word.
Your job is literally oversight. Your job is to find out. I'll just, the murderer says he didn't do it. I'm going to take the murderer at his word. What are we going to do here? Let's bring in Ravi Gupta. You all know him as the host of Majority 54 here on the MeidasTouch Network and author of a new book, Garbage Town. I'm going to, use your title and just apply it to what we just watched there. And I'll just call it a dumpster fire so I don't in any way interfere with the title of your book. But yes, Ravi, you had a top secret SCI clearance when you worked at the State Department. You worked in the Obama administration. You saw some of this stuff firsthand, how serious you had to take the protocols that are all being ignored here. What do you make all of this?
Yeah, I think the average person doesn't quite understand how many people are working in windowless rooms all across the world, not just in the United States, to keep our secrets for us. And when I was working at the US UN, I had top secret SCI clearance, which meant the kind of information that we had, sometimes you had to go into a room and then another room and then another room and another room to go see that information. And actually, that's the kind of information that was on this Signal chat. Whereas what previously under, bipartisan administrations, going back Obama to Bush to Clinton to HW, we had these protocols in place to say things like, for example, what Goldberg says he saw here, which is the full name of an active CIA officer, the sequencing of attacks before they happened, the exact time of attacks, and real-time damage assessments. Crenshaw is either actively ignorant or just straight up lying here. And everybody knows what would happen if this were a Democrat who did this. First of all, it's impossible to even conceive of a Biden administration or an Obama administration doing this, but pretend that they did. Could you imagine he would be as ignorant as he claims to be right now? This is active ignorance. At best, it's active ignorance. I think he's lying in these interviews. I think he knows that this was classified information and doesn't want to stick his neck out and get knocked down by the MAGA folks.
You see the Senate hearing that took place where you had John Ratcliffe, CIA director, you had Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence, you had Kash Patel, and the line they rolled out on Tuesday is, actually, this was perfect. This is how you handle it. They said there's nothing classified about this. It shows operational efficiency. So then the senator's like, all right, well then show us the full text thread, to which they go, no, we can't show that to you because it's under operational review. So that's what you had. Tulsi Gabbard, who was overseas, by the way, when that text thread was happening. Steve Witkoff, who wasn't at that hearing, but he was in Moscow when that happened. You had John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, at the Senate hearing.
Sounds very secure.
He was not, and Ratcliffe, the CIA director, said that he was not even aware, even to this day, he was not aware that Witkoff was in Moscow. Like, I know that. You're the CIA director. How do you know that? And then Hegseth, when he was in the tarmac on Monday, he did the whole, this is a discredited, horrible reporter, and we know nothing about it. This is remind people what Hegseth said, Blake.
Looking forward to it. One question. Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic? And were those details classified? You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy.
Robbie, I can't even watch the full clip. That reminds me of when TMZ would wait outside of like a bar at like 2 a.m.
And Britney Spears comes out.
I'm just telling you, Russia, it's not me, it's not me.
Honestly, this is one of the most chilling clips I've seen in a litany of insane clips out of the Trump administration over the past few months. And the reason is, this guy is the Secretary of Defense, and whatever problems I had with Jim Mattis, like, he looks like Churchill compared to this guy. Like, this guy sounds like he should be on Bannon's war room, not in the middle of the Pentagon. And he also, I don't want to pile on here, but the guy has, there were a lot of allegations against him when he was up for confirmation. He does not seem like the kind of person who has it all together. And this whole saga just tells you that everything's out of control. And I think that this is breaking through in a way that other stories don't. And people need to ask themselves why. Because generally speaking, national security issues, unless there's an actual national security incident and American lives, or we lose American lives, or there's some kind of active threat or whatever, then that breaks through. But this is breaking through, I think, in part because people know that we're in the beginning of the Trump administration, and we're going to get many more of these types of incompetent incidents. And we're not going to be so lucky next time. Like, it does seem like we avoided losing, having the enemy know our plans beforehand, but they easily could have. And now they all know that folks are communicating in these non-secure channels. So next time it's going to be Kash Patel sitting in Las Vegas communicating about active terrorist threats, and our adversaries and enemies are going to know he's using non-secure channels, and they're going to be able to circumvent that. And so that kind of stuff is going to happen. And that's why I think average Americans are reacting to this, being like, this is not what I signed up for.
Ravi, you went to Yale Law School.
Yes,
You worked in the State Department. You worked in the Obama administration. Probably your best qualifications, I want to say, is a host on the MeidasTouch network. If I do say so myself.
Absolutely.
So now you're writing a book here. I feel like the fact that you're a great fiction writer is just at this point showing off at this point with all of your talents. It's actually a great book, but why are you writing a fiction book other than to just show that you are great at everything that you do? In all seriousness, though, it's a really good book, Garbage Town. And number one, it's great to have you on this network. And look, I like to occasionally, from all of this kind of chaos and craziness, go and read some fiction now and then as well. They have a whole bookshelf behind me right here that people can't see. Why'd you write it?
Yeah, well, the quick plug to the Meidas Mighty is I grew up in Staten Island, New York, which is a purple district, but it was really Obama to Trump. I guess it was purple. Now it's very red. But the book is set in the 90s in Staten Island in the shadows of the Fresh Kills landfill, which is the largest garbage dump the world has ever seen. And it's a coming-of-age thriller. It's about a group of kids growing up in the 90s who discover something they shouldn't have, and they have to fight for survival. My co-host Jason Kander calls it Goonies meets Goodfellas. But what it really is a period piece. And that's what I know you have a lot of millennial members of your audience, probably the biggest base of your audience. And this book is really about that period of time where people had beepers and they had AOL Instant Messenger and they had their bikes and they would roam neighborhoods. They didn't have their cell phones distracting them and they would get in and out of trouble. And that's what people are reacting to. We've gotten universal acclaim. Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly named it an editor's pick. Wherever you go, Goodreads, it's like, near 5, perfect 5 on Goodreads. People love this book, I think, mostly because of those period references. But for the Meidas Mighty, it also is a subversive political book. It's about forgotten places. And in contrast to, a book that another Yale Law School graduate, J.D. Vance, wrote, Hillbilly Elegy, which has now turned into a grievance fest, telling his people that they're always to blame. My book is really about agency. It's about what happens when people are actually crooked and out to get you, but you still have to do the right thing. You can't just blame it on some, big evil and succumb to that evil yourself, like the vice president has. It's about actually pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, what Republicans claim they want to do, and actually doing the right thing. So it's subversive politically in a way that I think the Meidas Mighty would love.
Ravi Gupta, the book is called Garbage Town. Ravi Gupta from the MeidasTouch Network, Majority 54. Check out his podcast as well. And thanks for breaking down all of the craziness that I showed you at the outset and sharing with us your experience based on your security clearance.
Thank you, my friend.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 5 million subscribers.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.